Actually, I'm gonna say, where's the pomelo? Yeah. Depending on when you're looking at this. Part 16. What's the part? That was part 16. Going to go to part 17. Yeah, it's been a long week. We're all feeling tired here and there, feeling a bit fatigued here and there, but listen, this is nothing compared to what the children of Israel went through. They had to go through that wilderness experience. We were reading before in Patriarchs and Prophets through the audio books, and I'm going to see if I can do a little bit of continue from where the video of part 14 left off, or 15 left off, with Moses them being next to Jethro's home, with his wife also by Mount Sinai, after they did the trip from Red Sea to Mount Sinai on the Exodus experience. And we're going to go to a little bit of that, and then we'll go back to the reading again. The reading is interesting. The audiobook version, he has a different voice than the one who reads the Bible. He's very more soft and hello. He's more like, it's a nice storybook time. It's good. So if you want to hear my big mouth, try to read some of this stuff there, read some of it there. And then when my throat starts the voice has to go, then we'll go back to the audiobook, okay? So it won't be like monotonous and stuff, His voice is different. It makes me want to sleep sometimes. But when we had it on the other videos, it was on while the car was driving. So we'll see. You never know. We just mix it up and see what it is. We're in the backyard right now, getting back into Patriarchs and Prophets, Exodus. It can be a very, depending on how you look at the perspective, like a very happy experience, but also be a very trying experience, because this is our story. This is our history. This is our legacy. This is our present day event as well. So even though we're not necessarily tracking through the desert or to the area like that, we're still on an Exodus experience to heavenly spiritual Canaan. Along the way, we'll have many challenges and trials, many things you have to learn. One thing was nice about this, what you're gonna read in Patriarchs and Prophets, inspired by Ellen G. White, written by Ellen G. White, inspired by God, who calls himself the lesser light, pointing to the greater light, the Bible, in the Old Testament. Moses learns a very important lesson there. That's for all of us to learn as well. And couldn't tell us how to listen and take instruction. How not to think, I got it all. It's all about me. I figured everything's about me, and I don't need nobody else. I don't need no input. I got it. We have to remain humble and teachable, and moldable by God. We have to be ready to listen to God and to have a word in season and out of season. But to do that, we have to sit humbly at Jesus' feet to learn what to say and how to speak. And I know people say you should listen to. You speak too fast. I know. I'm trying. But speaking fast is my gift. Just letting you know. Speak fast. Speak a lot too. That's another gift. So I got 2 gifts already. You? All right, we're here. So here we go. And this one from the Red Sea to Sinai, that's taken based upon Exodus chapter 15, verse 22 to chapter 18, verse 27. So it goes all the way from there to there. We're going to finish up that chapter from the Red Sea to Sinai, and then we're going to go into the one about the law given to Israel. So we're going to get into it. Okay? There we go. So we left off, the other one cut off, I think 15, cut off right at the part where they finished battling the Amalekites, who kept attacking them, attacking the people on the back, attacking the people that were vulnerable, and thinking that no one would concern. They would just kill them in the back. That's just wrong. But God watches everything. He watches how people are attacked in every walks of society. He doesn't want Christians to be bludgeoned and to be abused and assaulted. Neither do Christians, anybody doing this to anybody else. We're not to be causing trouble to anybody, but we should respect everyone and love everyone. Okay? Hate the sin, but love the sinners, which we all are. But love each other mostly in everything. Everything we do to be like God. Okay? So let's continue the reading. What lesson did Moses learn himself that the children of Israel also need to learn, and we need to learn from what he's been doing so far, from the whole trip? Because he spent 40 years learning in Egypt, then 40 years living with Jethro and them in his family in the wilderness, camped by Sinai, and then 40 years wandering in the wilderness with the children of Israel because of their disobedience to God's law and complaining and murmuring and the mixed multitude inside of them with the group, which kept making it bad. So it's a lot of time, and this is a lot of stuff he had to go through, a lot of sacrifice. He didn't do anything wrong in that regards, but he had to endure everything that they had to go through as well with them. That's love. That's devotion. That's a very Jesus type, suffered for our sake, so he can help to save them. And God did a surprise. God gave him a surprise at the end of all the trials he went through. Said Moses was one of the meekest, humblest, gentlest men out there. Even after he got upset and frustrated that the people kept complaining for water. He smote the rock twice. So many lessons to learn. You know, and look at this one. This is Acts of the Apostle. It's like this kind of image, you know. Sometimes you're there, you barely can hold on yourself, but you got to try to help your fellow brother, sister up to safety. So the covers are very, very nicely put, you know. This is the one about Paul, you know, the ship and the prisoners had to swim ashore. This is a story in the book of Acts. The same basic story all through the Bible. God and humanity working to save humanity against evil forces and wicked spiritual forces, Satan and his agents. Okay, let's see here. So continue on page 306, Patriarchs and Prophets. Okay. It says here, not far distant from where the Israelites were now encamped was the home of Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses. Jethro had heard of the deliverance of the Hebrews, and he set out to visit them, and to restore to Moses his wife and 2 sons. Many people, you don't hear about them too much in one of the videos they make about Moses. His wife and 2 sons, I'm like, and there's a lot of things I like to find out. Why were they not allowed to accompany him there? The children of Israel had wives and the children there, but maybe just didn't want to make him endure the hardship of everything. Some videos I saw they already put him there. They said that he sent them back so they don't have to endure. Let's see if they say anything on that. All right? The wife and 2 sons. The great leader was informed by messengers, right, of their approach, and he went out with joy to meet them. And the first greeting over, conducted them to his tent. He had sent back his family when on his way to the perils of leading Israel from Egypt, right? So that's why Moses sent them back. He didn't want them to kind of go through the hard journey that they had to go through there on the perils from Egypt. But now, Moses, he could again enjoy the relief and comfort of their society, wife and the 2 sons. To Jethro, he recounted the wonderful dealings of God with Israel. And the patriarch rejoiced and blessed the Lord. And with Moses and the elders, he united in offering sacrifice and holding a solemn feast in commemoration of God's mercy. As Jethro remained in the camp, he soon saw how heavy were the burdens that rested upon Moses. To maintain order and discipline among the vast, ignorant, and untrained multitude was indeed a stupendous task. I mean, this is Moses alone trying to do this with Aaron and Miriam, you know, assistant on the side, but they had their own issues also, and they're trying to keep it together. And sometimes you say, well, why didn't God give them everything up front? Why did he tell them and tell them what's going to happen, exactly every detail? Sometimes God permits us to endure some things and go through some situations and circumstances that we may see our need and understand. Also, sometimes I think it's a test us to see, do we acknowledge and understand that God's looking out for us and that we need each other, that no man or woman is an island, that we need other people, and other people can lend some input. And it's amazing how the timing, he didn't have to speak and tell Moses anything, but yet he's watching Moses, and he says, my son-in-law is going through so much, and he has to care for this whole multitude. What a marvelous work God has done for him. And he said, Moses praise, God has done things. And Moses is happy to do the will of God, helping, you know, to lead his people to the safe place. And yet, he's burning himself out. He's getting exhausted at the same time while doing it. We need help. We need people to help in the mission and the work of God, spreading the gospel and to help win more souls to Christ. We need help. Even sometimes words of encouragement and kindness. Okay, when you have to constantly try to reassure other people and try to encourage them while they're trying to plot against him and threaten him against Moses and others, you know, and just to try to always trying to vie for the leadership. Remember, there's a mixed multitude, meaning like one that's a group that's unruly, kind of bad. You know, everyone decided to come on, hey, freedom, they want to go join the group, but they're not exactly following Christ. Those groups that can be a very bad thorn in their sides. This is how in this world here, you have many thorns. We call them weeds or tares among the wheat of the good people. They're mixed up in the multitude with us, and we have to live and abide alongside with them. Wolves in sheep clothing sometimes. How to make it through, and how to stay encouraged while you're tired and fatigued and exhausted yourself and have to go to the same, you know, issues and feelings, how you may be hungry and thirsty as everything else. As Jesus was tempted also in the wilderness and had to go through the same thing after fasting, 40 days, 40 nights, how it is to feel hunger and thirst. Yeah, so God is, in all points, understanding of how we go through things. He's there. And my fingernails while we're going to this, yeah, I thought he was squeezing one of the car doors while doing a project for lawn mowing. But look at this, coming back just at the right time to take over the other nail. So God has helped me that too. See, it doesn't hurt. Gotta be tough, man. No skin in the game. Including a fingernail. You see? So let's see what he has here. So as Jethro remained in the camp, he soon saw how heavy were the burdens that rested upon Moses. To maintain order and discipline among the vast, ignorant, and untrained multitude was indeed a stupendous task. Moses was their recognized leader and magistrate, and not only the general interests and duties of the people, but the controversies that arose among them. Because could you imagine people there? all those people just among each other, who took each other's stuff, who may have stolen something, who may have done something or taken something. And you think that these people who were slaves, that they were descendants of Joseph and the tribes of Israel, that they would understand that, hey, we have to be the best people we can, be best of God. But you see, after being in there for so long and being attacked and abused for so long, I guess many of them think that it's, hey, me against everybody else. It's like survival of the fittest, right? It's like, I better get mine before you get yours, I mean, they forgot all the things. They forgot all the teachings because they were kept so busy working in hard bondage that they forgot about God. They forgot about how to work and to do the right thing, how to be kind and loving and gentle to God's people, to each other. Because they got themselves in a lot of trouble along the way. They learned the ways of the Egyptians. They learned the ways of Satan in many ways. They learned the ways of Baal in other ways. They learned the ways of idolatry, of falling in the same vices. And that's what happened when God said, by beholding, we become changed. If we're not focusing on working and being amongst people that focus on God and working vigilantly and daily to save God's people and to spread a good word and a message and to say kind things, whatsoever things that are lovely and pure, and if they're not doing those things and singing psalms of praise and hymns and stuff, they can easily fall back into the way of just fall in the worldly ways and standards and the devilish things. And then it's like, for them, hopefully somebody can recognize their condition and say, hey, what's going on? Where am I? Other people can see you and say, hey, brother, sister, you're going the wrong way. Don't head that way, my friend. There's a better path. We need people to intervene, We need people to watch and say, hey, maybe there's a better way. Let's see. So, while Moses is doing his work, Jethro is watching and saying, maybe I got to help him with this. So he says, what Moses was doing from what Jethro was watching, he said Moses had permitted this, to be able to be kind of like a judge and an intercessor, magistrate for the people. He wanted to help the people. He wanted to help, to make sure that they're doing the right thing and not, not defrauding or harming their brother or sister. He had permitted this, for it gave him an opportunity to instruct them. As he said, I do make them know the statutes of God, he told Jethro, and his laws. But Jethro remonstrated against this, saying, this thing is too heavy for thee. Thou art not able to perform it thyself alone. So he didn't say, you can't do this. No, he said, you need help, Moses. Words of advice. His father-in-law gave him this. That will surely wear away, he's telling Moses. Many people too. It's, as he counseled Moses to appoint proper persons as rulers of thousands and others as rulers of hundreds and others of tens. They should be able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, means taking and doing things that are not, that God didn't give them. They want to take things that didn't belong to them. So people who don't take bribes, not able to be corrupted. These were to judge in all matters of minor consequence, while the most difficult and important cases should still be brought before Moses, who was to be to the people, said Jethro, to Godward, and that thou mayest bring the cause unto God. And thou shalt teach them ordinances and laws, and shalt show them the way wherein they must walk, and the work that they must do. This counsel was accepted, and it not only brought relief to Moses, but resulted in establishing more perfect order among the people. See, God can use others to tell others to help others. God has been involved from the beginning, and he's still there even to this trial and time that they're going through. Remember, cloud to cover by daytime to give them cover and shade, and a pillar of fire by night to give them warmth and to guide them along the way. He's been with us all the way through, even up until present time. He's Emmanuel. He's with us. So it's like, and he gives us the counsel that we need to follow. And Moses had to learn this. See what happened to him here? Moses' character is different. The Lord had greatly honored Moses and had wrought wonders by his hand. Page 307. But the fact that he had been chosen to instruct others did not lead him to conclude that he himself needed no instruction. The chosen leader of Israel listened gladly to the suggestions of the godly priests of Midian and adopted his plan as a wise arrangement. That's humility, to be able to take the counsel of others, but not just anybody, but to take it from another godly perspective, a godly person. That's the best thing. If you're going to give advice to people, give godly advice and do it in a godly fashion, as God does for us. Because I don't want what advice mankind wants to give me. A lot of it is no good. I want God's way. Man can say do what you want, and if you get caught, blame somebody else for lying, cheating, stealing, covet, and take what doesn't belong to you. God says no. Seek his righteousness, Jesus' righteousness first, and God will give us the rest. Let's see. From Rephidim, the people continued their journey following the movement of the cloudy pillar. Their route had led across barren plains, over steep ascents, and through rocky defiles. Often, as they had traversed the sandy waste, they had seen before them rugged mountains like huge bulwarks piled up directly across their course. and seeming to forbid all further progress. I mean, they had a challenging route. But as they approached, openings here and there appeared in the mountain wall, and beyond another plain opened a view. Through one of the deep, gravely passes they were now led. It was a grand and impressive scene. Between the rocky cliffs, rising hundreds of feet on either side, flowed in a living tide, far as the eye could reach. The hosts of Israel with their flocks and herds. Imagine it. Could you imagine seeing this procession in the wilderness and desert? And now before him, in solemn majesty, Mount Sinai lifted this massive front, this big mountain, where once Moses was watching the cloud, he said, I see it burning. It's like they were scared to go in there. What's happening up at Mount Sinai? There's something happening up there. It's so scary. God was at work up there. Now before him in solemn majesty, Mount Sinai lifted its massive front. The cloudy pillar rested up on its summit, and the people spread their tents upon the plains beneath. Here was to be their home for nearly a year. At night, the pillar of fire assured them of divine protection, and while they were locked in slumber, the bread of heaven fell gently upon the encampment, called manna. The dawn gilded the dark ridges of the mountains, and the sun's golden rays pierced the deep gorges, seeming to these weary travelers like beams of mercy from the throne of God. On every hand, vast, rugged heights seemed in their solitary grandeur to speak of eternal endurance and majesty. Some people love to see mountains and pictures. If you look at the designs you see on the show, like Matty.Etsy and Relatable, we love to make mountains and stuff. Mountains have a sense of, mountains have a certain presence about them that says, hey, there's strength and there's a solid, there's something there, So I like mountains. I like the wilderness mountain scenes. And it's here too, in case that's where you come from, Here, the mind was impressed with solemnity and awe. Man was made to feel his ignorance and weakness in the presence of him who weighed the mountains in scales and the hills in a balance. It's Isaiah 40, verse 12. Here Israel was to receive the most powerful, I call powerful to revelation ever made by God to men. Here the Lord had gathered his people that he might impress upon them the sacredness of his requirements by declaring with his own voice his holy law. Great and radical changes were to be wrought in them. For the degrading influences of servitude and a long continued association with idolatry had left their mark upon habits and character, meaning that they forgot a lot of things that they were supposed to be doing from the time they were brought into bondage and slavery. And imagine, many generations passed, over 400 years, I think like 430 years it was, of being enslaved and living there. That is like, wow, they forgot. Imagine, most generations like 40 years. So that was like 10 generations plus. That is like, they just, as time goes on, if they're not constantly being reinforced with the message of God, it's a long time. 400 years? Wow, it's a long time. 10 generations.
440 years.
I think 430. What I read in 400. Wow. So a lot of things have escaped and forgotten. And I look at our time now. Earth is almost 7,000 years according to biblical chronology. And yet we've forgotten a lot of things. Some things will still hold true, but a lot of things have been forgotten. Now, sometimes if you're not thinking about it, living it every day, we can easily forget stuff. But God is working with us. He says here, God was working to lift them, the people of children of Israel, from after all they've been through, all the habits they've learned, all the degrading things, to bring back their character, to bring them back to where they're supposed to be. God is working to lift them to a higher moral level by giving them a knowledge of himself. And he said, well, why did God let them stay there for so long? Why did God not permit them to come out earlier? Why did God do this? I believe that, me personally, my own opinion is that God is allowing them to see what happens in time if they're not constantly focusing on his message. What also when we get so busy with the cares of life, or we end up being enslaved to the things and the passions or duties, or enslaved to our work, enslaved to our activities and lifestyles. If we're enslaved to those things, we tend to forget God. And it can happen very quickly, or this is slowly grading over time. It can compromise a lot. Before you know, then it became bad, and then all you can see is that we just want to have things of. Then we're begging for ease and escape from it. And when we do escape from it, we're still enslaved in our mind psychologically to what got us to be enslaved in the first place. So we have to be careful and see how these things go. But so let's see what she does. She gives a little. I like what she does. She gives a nice little ending, like a little pep talk somewhere here in the end of it. Then she goes into the next one. I'm gonna try to save my voice. My voice is still working hard after the last video. I'm not one of those long-winded pastors. Speak for hours. No, speak for a little bit, but you gotta save the voice. So I'm gonna read up in this part here. Then we're gonna let the audiobook read through the notebook, and then we'll be able to use it through the phone again. Okay, so I'm gonna end this part here. We'll read this part here. It says, "How good is the Lord? Know therefore that the Lord is God, thy God. He is God, the faithful God, who which keepeth covenant and mercy with them that love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations. Deuteronomy 7 verse 9. Behold, God is mighty, and despiseth not any. He is mighty in strength and wisdom. Job 36 verse 5. And the child grew and waxed strong in spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. Luke 2 verse 40, like Jesus was talking about. He's talking about how good is the Lord, right? God, he is the rock. His work is perfect. For all his ways are judgment, a God of truth and without iniquity. Just and right is he. Deuteronomy 32 verse 4. The heavens are the work of thy hands. They shall perish, but thou shalt endure. Thou art the same, and thy years shall have no end. That's in Psalms 102 verse 25 to 27. And Romans 11, chapter 11 verse 33. A little pep talk for people kind of say, hey, God is good. He's a good God. He's a good God. So here, we're going to read now from Patriarchs and Prophets, the audiobooks, the law given to Israel. Know the brick? I like when he comes on like Transformers. Boop. Yeah, it's ready. I like that stuff. It's good. So the law given to Israel. Okay? Let's go here and see how it goes. What law? God's 10 commandment law. Very important. We're going to read through a good portion of it. I'm going to try to make the videos a little shorter. Just like after each section, law given to Israel, I'll try to stop it there so you can have more time to kind of catch your breath and maybe, if it helps that way, because sometimes it's not that easy to kind of go through all this stuff. But a lot of stuff I want to get to. There's so much stuff I want to talk about. The children of Israel, they were a real piece of work, just as we are. They went through a lot, and I thank God that they didn't give up and that they were good, faithful people in there despite the mixed multitude. So let's see what happened here, okay?
Chapter 27, the law given to Israel. This chapter is based on Exodus 19 to 24.
Soon after the encampment at Sinai, Moses was called up into the mountain to meet with God. Alone he climbed the steep and rugged path and drew near to the cloud that marked the place of Jehovah's presence. Israel was now to be taken into a close and peculiar relation to the Most High, to be incorporated as a church and a nation under the government of God. The message to Moses for the people was, Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. Now therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people. For all the earth is mine, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and an holy nation. Moses returned to the camp, and having summoned the elders of Israel, he repeated to them the divine message. Their answer was, All that the Lord has spoken we will do. Thus they entered into a solemn covenant with God, pledging themselves to accept him as their ruler, by which they became, in a special sense, the subjects of his authority. Again their leader ascended the mountain, and the Lord said unto him, Lo, I come unto thee in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with thee, and believe thee forever. When they met with difficulties in the way, they were disposed to murmur against Moses and Aaron, and accuse them of leading the hosts of Israel from Egypt to destroy them. The Lord would honor Moses before them, that they might be led to confide in his instructions. God purposed to make the occasion of speaking his law a scene of awful grandeur in keeping with its exalted character. The people were to be impressed that everything connected with the service of God must be regarded with greatest reverence. The Lord said to Moses, Go unto the people, and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes and be ready against the third day. For the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. During these intervening days, all were to occupy the time in solemn preparation to appear before God. Their person and their clothing must be freed from impurity. And as Moses should point out their sins, they were to devote themselves to humiliation, fasting, and prayer, that their hearts might be cleansed from iniquity. The preparations were made according to the command, and in obedience to a further injunction, Moses directed that a barrier be placed about the mount, that neither man nor beast might intrude upon the sacred precinct. If any ventured so much as to touch it, the penalty was instant death. On the morning of the third day, as the eyes of all the people were turned toward the mount, its summit was covered with a thick cloud, which grew more black and dense, sweeping downward until the entire mountain was wrapped in darkness and awful mystery. Then a sound as of a trumpet was heard, summoning the people to meet with God, and Moses led them forth to the base of the mountain. From the thick darkness flashed vivid lightnings, while peals of thunder echoed and re-echoed among the surrounding heights. And Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. The glory of the Lord was like devouring fire on the top of the mount in the sight of the assembled multitude. And the voice of the trumpet sounded long and waxed louder and louder. So terrible were the tokens of Jehovah's presence that the hosts of Israel shook with fear and fell upon their faces before the Lord. Even Moses exclaimed, I exceedingly fear and quake. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 21. And now the thunders ceased. The trumpet was no longer heard. The earth was still. There was a period of solemn silence, and then the voice of God was heard. Speaking out of the thick darkness that enshrouded him as he stood upon the mount, surrounded by a retinue of angels, the Lord made known his law. Moses, describing the scene, says, The Lord came from Sinai and rose up from Seir unto them. He shined forth from Mount Paran, and he came with 10,000s of saints. From his right hand went a fiery law for them. Yea, he loved the people. All his saints are in thy hand, and they sat down at thy feet. Every one shall receive of thy words. Deuteronomy chapter 33, verses 2 and 3. Jehovah revealed himself not alone in the awful majesty of the judge and lawgiver, but as the compassionate guardian of his people. I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. He whom they had already known as their guide and deliverer, who had brought them forth from Egypt, making a way for them through the sea, and overthrowing Pharaoh and his hosts, who had thus shown himself to be above all the gods of Egypt, he it was who now spoke his law. The law was not spoken at this time exclusively for the benefit of the Hebrews. God honored them by making them the guardians and keepers of his law, but it was to be held as a sacred trust for the whole world. The precepts of the Decalogue are adapted to all mankind, and they were given for the instruction and government of all. 10 precepts, brief, comprehensive, and authoritative, cover the duty of man to God and to his fellow man, and all based upon the great fundamental principle of love. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself. Luke chapter 10, verse 27. See also Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 and 5, and Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. In the 10 Commandments, these principles are carried out in detail and made applicable to the condition and circumstances of man. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Jehovah, the eternal, self-existent, uncreated one, himself the source and sustainer of all, is alone entitled to supreme reverence and worship. Man is forbidden to give to any other object the first place in his affections or his service. Whatever we cherish that tends to lessen our love for God, or to interfere with the service due him, of that do we make a god.
Right.
Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. The second commandment forbids the worship of the true God by images or similitudes. Many heathen nations claimed that their images were mere figures or symbols by which the deity was worshipped, but God has declared such worship to be sin. The attempt to represent the Eternal One by material objects would lower man's conception of God. The mind, turned away from the infinite perfection of Jehovah, would be attracted to the creature rather than to the Creator. And as his conceptions of God were lowered, so would man become degraded. I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God. The close and sacred relation of God to his people is represented under the figure of marriage. Idolatry being spiritual adultery, the displeasure of God against it is fitly called jealousy. Visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. It is inevitable that children should suffer from the consequences of parental wrongdoing, but they are not punished for the parents' guilt, except as they participate in their sins. It is usually the case, however, that children walk in the steps of their parents. By inheritance and example, the sons become partakers of the father's sin. Wrong tendencies, perverted appetites, and debased morals, as well as physical disease and degeneracy, are transmitted as a legacy from father to son to the third and fourth generation. This fearful truth should have a solemn power to restrain men from following a course of sin.
Do you see what she's doing there? So that's why she's so special, and that's why I know it takes a little adjustment going from one voice of the previous read of the Bible audio versus the one in Ellen G. White's writings. This one voice is very soft, solemn voice. It's like an older version, how he had back in the days in elementary school, those old time stories in the 80s and 90s. So he takes a little get used to his voice and say, okay, but he says it much clearer and more crisp and concise than I'm saying it. What she does though, she sheds light into the little workings, like why the commandments were written the way they are, how the 10 commandments are given, and what are the details that keep the commandments as they are. Because she's like, how would you understand, like this case about the third and fourth generation? I'm like, why God said unto the third and fourth generations? What does it mean? That they hate him is like, how? A lot of things pass on to 3-4 generations. So then you say, oh, look how many generations are passed on. And a generation is roughly like 40 years, roughly. A lot of things happen. And it's like, very interesting. So there's a reason why. So she's explaining what each commandment are the way they are. So bear with us as we go along. It's very necessary.
Showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. In prohibiting the worship of false gods, the second commandment by implication enjoins the worship of the true God. And to those who are faithful in his service, mercy is promised, not merely to the third and fourth generation, as is the wrath threatened against those who hate him, but to thousands of generations. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. This commandment not only prohibits false oaths and common swearing, but it forbids us to use the name of God in a light or careless manner, without regard to its awful significance. By the thoughtless mention of God in common conversation, by appeals to him in trivial matters, and by the frequent and thoughtless repetition of his name, we dishonor him. Holy and reverend is his name. Psalm 111, verse 9.
In case people want to watch. I don't want to block
All
it.
should meditate upon his majesty, his purity, and holiness, that the heart may be impressed with a sense of his exalted character, and his holy name should be uttered with reverence and solemnity. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. The Sabbath is not introduced as a new institution, but as having been founded at creation. It is to be remembered and observed as the memorial of the Creator's work. Pointing to God as the maker of the heavens and the earth, it distinguishes the true God from all false gods. All who keep the seventh day signify by this act that they are worshippers of Jehovah. Thus the Sabbath is a sign of man's allegiance to God as long as there are any upon the earth to serve him. The fourth commandment is the only one of all the 10 in which are found both the name and the title of the lawgiver. It is the only one that shows by whose authority the law is given. Thus it contains the seal of God, affixed to his law as evidence of its authenticity and binding force. God has given men 6 days wherein to labor, and he requires that their own work be done in the 6 working days. Acts of necessity and mercy are permitted on the Sabbath, The sick and suffering are at all times to be cared for, but unnecessary labor is to be strictly avoided. Turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord honorable, and honor him, not doing thine own ways, nor finding thine own pleasure. Isaiah chapter 58, verse 13. Nor does the prohibition end here. Nor speaking thine own words, says the prophet. Those who discuss business matters or lay plans on the Sabbath are regarded by God as though engaged in the actual transaction of business. To keep the Sabbath holy, we should not even allow our minds to dwell upon things of a worldly character. And the commandment includes all within our gates. The inmates of the house are to lay aside their worldly business during the sacred hours. All should unite to honor God by willing service upon his holy day. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Parents are entitled to a degree of love and respect which is due to no other person. God himself, who has placed upon them a responsibility for the souls committed to their charge, has ordained that during the earlier years of life, parents shall stand in the place of God to their children. And he who rejects the rightful authority of his parents is rejecting the authority of God. The fifth commandment requires children not only to yield respect, submission, and obedience to their parents, but also to give them love and tenderness, to lighten their cares, to guard their reputation, and to succor and comfort them in old age. It also enjoins respect for ministers and rulers and for all others to whom God has delegated authority. This, says the apostle, is the first commandment with promise. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 2. To Israel, expecting soon to enter Canaan, it was a pledge to the obedient of long life in that good land. But it has a wider meaning, including all the Israel of God, and promising eternal life upon the earth when it shall be freed from the curse of sin. Thou shalt not kill. All acts of injustice that tend to shorten life, the spirit of hatred and revenge, or the indulgence of any passion that leads to injurious acts toward others, or causes us even to wish them harm, for whosoever hateth his brother is a murderer. A selfish neglect of caring for the needy or suffering, all self-indulgence or unnecessary deprivation or excessive labor that tends to injure health, all these are, to a greater or less degree, violations of the sixth commandment. Thou shalt not commit adultery. This commandment forbids not only acts of impurity, but sensual thoughts and desires, or any practice that tends to excite them. Purity is demanded not only in the outward life, but in the secret intents and emotions of the heart. Christ, who taught the far-reaching obligation of the law of God, declared the evil thought or look to be as truly sin as is the unlawful deed. Thou shalt not steal. Both public and private sins are included in this prohibition. The eighth commandment condemns man-stealing and slave-dealing, and forbids wars of conquest. It condemns theft and robbery. It demands strict integrity in the minutest details of the affairs of life. It forbids overreaching in trade and requires the payment of just debts or wages. It declares that every attempt to advantage oneself by the ignorance, weakness, or misfortune of another is registered as fraud in the books of heaven. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. False speaking in any matter, every attempt or purpose to deceive our neighbor is here included. An intention to deceive is what constitutes falsehood. By a glance of the eye, a motion of the hand, an expression of the countenance, a falsehood may be told as effectually as by words. All intentional overstatement, every hint or insinuation calculated to convey an erroneous or exaggerated impression, even the statement of facts in such a manner as to mislead, is falsehood.
What happens too often?
This precept forbids every effort to injure our neighbor's reputation by misrepresentation or evil surmising, by slander or tale-bearing. Even the intentional suppression of truth, by which injury may result to others, is a violation of the 9th commandment. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. The 10th commandment strikes at the very root of all sins, prohibiting the selfish desire from which springs the sinful act. He who, in obedience to God's law, refrains from indulging even a sinful desire for that which belongs to another, will not be guilty of an act of wrong toward his fellow creatures. Such were the sacred precepts of the Decalogue, spoken amid thunder and flame, and with a wonderful display of the power and majesty of the great lawgiver. God accompanied the proclamation of his law with exhibitions of his power and glory, that his people might never forget the scene, and that they might be impressed with profound veneration for the author of the law, the creator of heaven and earth. He would also show to all men the sacredness, the importance, and the permanence of his law. The people of Israel were overwhelmed with terror. The awful power of God's utterances seemed more than their trembling hearts could bear. For as God's great rule of right was presented before them, they realized as never before the offensive character of sin and their own guilt in the sight of a holy God. They shrank away from the mountain in fear and awe. The multitude cried out to Moses, "Speak thou with us, and we will hear, but let not God speak with us, lest we die." The leader answered, "Fear not, for God is come to prove you, and that his fear may be before your faces, that ye sin not." The people, however, remained at a distance, gazing in terror upon the scene, while Moses drew near unto the thick darkness where God was. The minds of the people, blinded and debased by slavery and heathenism, were not prepared to appreciate fully the far-reaching principles of God's 10 precepts. That the obligations of the Decalogue might be more fully understood and enforced, additional precepts were given, illustrating and applying the principles of the 10 Commandments. These laws were called judgments, both because they were framed in infinite wisdom and equity, and because the magistrates were to give judgment according to them. Unlike the 10 Commandments, they were delivered privately to Moses, who was to communicate them to the people. The first of these laws related to servants. In ancient times, criminals were sometimes sold into slavery by the judges. In some cases, debtors were sold by their creditors, and poverty even led persons to sell themselves or their children. But a Hebrew could not be sold as a slave for life. His term of service was limited to 6 years. On the 7th, he was to be set at liberty. Man-stealing, deliberate murder, and rebellion against parental authority were to be punished with death.
Wow.
The holding of slaves not of Israelitish birth was permitted, but their life and person were strictly guarded. The murderer of a slave was to be punished. An injury inflicted upon one by his master, though no more than the loss of a tooth, entitled him to his freedom. The Israelites had lately been servants themselves, and now that they were to have servants under them, they were to beware of indulging the spirit of cruelty and exaction from which they had suffered under their Egyptian taskmasters. The memory of their own bitter servitude should enable them to put themselves in the servant's place, leading them to be kind and compassionate, to deal with others as they would wish to be dealt with. The rights of widows and orphans were especially guarded, and a tender regard for their helpless condition was enjoined. "If thou afflict them in any wise," the Lord declared, "and they cry at all unto me, I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath shall wax hot, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall be widows, and your children fatherless." Aliens who united themselves with Israel were to be protected from wrong or oppression. "Thou shalt not oppress a stranger, for ye know the heart of a stranger, seeing ye were strangers in the land of Egypt." The taking of usury from the poor was forbidden. A poor man's raiment or blanket taken as a pledge must be restored to him at nightfall. He who was guilty of theft was required to restore double. Respect for magistrates and rulers was enjoined, and judges were warned against perverting judgment, aiding a false cause, or receiving bribes. Calumny and slander were prohibited, and acts of kindness enjoined, even toward personal enemies. Again, the people were reminded of the sacred obligation of the Sabbath. Yearly feasts were appointed, at which all the men of the nation were to assemble before the Lord, bringing to him their offerings of gratitude and the first fruits of his bounties. The object of all these regulations was stated. They proceeded from no exercise of mere arbitrary sovereignty. All were given for the good of Israel. The Lord said, "Ye shall be holy men unto me, worthy to be acknowledged by a holy God." These laws were to be recorded by Moses and carefully treasured as the foundation of the national law, and with the 10 precepts which they were given to illustrate the condition of the fulfillment of God's promises to Israel. The message was now given them from Jehovah, "Behold, I send an angel before thee, to keep thee in the way, and to bring thee into the place which I have prepared. Beware of him, and obey his voice. Provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. But if thou shalt indeed obey his voice, and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy unto thine enemies, and an adversary unto thine adversaries." During all the wanderings of Israel, Christ in the pillar of cloud and of fire was their leader. While there were types pointing to a Savior to come, there was also a present Savior, who gave commands to Moses for the people, and who was set forth before them as the only channel of blessing. Upon descending from the mountain, Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord, and all the judgments. And all the people answered with one voice and said, "All the words which the Lord has said we will do." This pledge, together with the words of the Lord which it bound them to obey, was written by Moses in a book. Then followed the ratification of the covenant. An altar was built at the foot of the mountain, and beside it 12 pillars were set up, according to the 12 tribes of Israel, as a testimony to their acceptance of the covenant. Sacrifices were then presented by young men chosen for the service. Having sprinkled the altar with the blood of the offerings, Moses took the book of the covenant and read in the audience of the people. Thus the conditions of the covenant were solemnly repeated, and all were at liberty to choose whether or not they would comply with them. They had at the first promised to obey the voice of God, but they had since heard his law proclaimed, and its principles had been particularized that they might know how much this covenant involved. Again the people answered with one accord, "All that the Lord has said will we do, and be obedient." When Moses had spoken every precept to all the people according to the law, he took the blood and sprinkled both the book and all the people, saying, "This is the blood of the testament which God hath enjoined unto you." Hebrews chapter 9, verses 19 and 20. Arrangements were now to be made for the full establishment of the chosen nation under Jehovah as their king. Moses had received the command, "Come up unto the Lord, thou and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship ye afar off. And Moses alone shall come near the Lord." While the people worshipped at its foot, these chosen men were called up into the mount. The 70 elders were to assist Moses in the government of Israel, and God put upon them his Spirit, and honored them with a view of his power and greatness. And they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet as it were a paved work of a sapphire stone, and as it were the body of heaven in his clearness. They did not behold the deity, but they saw the glory of his presence. Before this they could not have endured such a scene, but the exhibition of God's power had awed them to repentance. They had been contemplating his glory, purity, and mercy, until they could approach nearer to him who was the subject of their meditations. Moses and his minister Joshua were now summoned to meet with God, and as they were to be some time absent, the leader appointed Aaron and Hur, assisted by the elders, to act in his stead. And Moses went up into the mount, and a cloud covered the mount. and the glory of the Lord abode upon Mount Sinai. For 6 days the cloud covered the mountain as a token of God's special presence, yet there was no revelation of himself or communication of his will. During this time Moses remained in waiting for a summons to the presence chamber of the Most High. He had been directed, "Come up to me into the mount, and be there." And though his patience and obedience were tested, he did not grow weary of watching or forsake his post. This period of waiting was to him a time of preparation, of close self-examination. Even this favored servant of God could not at once approach into his presence and endure the exhibitions of his glory. 6 days must be employed in devoting himself to God by searching of heart, meditation, and prayer before he could be prepared for direct communication with his Maker. Upon the 7th day, which was the Sabbath, Moses was called up into the cloud. The thick cloud opened in the sight of all Israel, and the glory of the Lord broke forth like devouring fire. And Moses went into the midst of the cloud, and gat him up into the mount. And Moses was in the mount 40 days and 40 nights. The 40 days' tarry in the mount did not include the 6 days of preparation. During the 6 days Joshua was with Moses, and together they ate of the manna, and drank of the brook that descended out of the mount. But Joshua did not enter with Moses into the cloud. He remained without, and continued to eat and drink daily, while awaiting the return of Moses. But Moses fasted during the entire 40 days. During his stay in the mount, Moses received directions for the building of a sanctuary, in which the divine presence would be specially manifested. "Let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them." Exodus chapter 25, verse 8, was the command of God. For the 3rd time the observance of the Sabbath was enjoined. "It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever," the Lord declared, "that ye may know that I am Jehovah that doth sanctify you. Ye shall keep the Sabbath therefore, for it is holy unto you. Whosoever doeth any work therein, that soul shall be cut off from among his people." Exodus chapter 31, verse 17, also verses 13 and 14. Directions had just been given for the immediate erection of the tabernacle for the service of God. And now the people might conclude, because the object had in view was the glory of God, and also because of their great need of a place of worship, that they would be justified in working at the building upon the Sabbath. To guard them from this error, the warning was given. Even the sacredness and urgency of that special work for God must not lead them to infringe upon his holy rest day. Henceforth the people were to be honored with the abiding presence of their King. "I will dwell among the children of Israel, and will be their God, and the tabernacle shall be sanctified by my glory." Exodus chapter 29, verses 45 and 43, was the assurance given to Moses. As a symbol of God's authority and the embodiment of his will, there was delivered to Moses a copy of the Decalogue engraved by the finger of God himself upon 2 tables of stone. Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 10, and Exodus chapter 32, verses 15 and 16, to be sacredly enshrined in the sanctuary, which, when made, was to be the visible center of the nation's worship. From a race of slaves, the Israelites had been exalted above all peoples to be the peculiar treasure of the King of Kings. God had separated them from the world, that he might commit to them a sacred trust. He had made them the depositaries of his law, and he purposed, through them, to preserve among men the knowledge of himself. Thus the light of heaven was to shine out to a world enshrouded in darkness, and a voice was to be heard appealing to all peoples to turn from their idolatry to serve the living God. If the Israelites would be true to their trust, they would become a power in the world. God would be their defense, and he would exalt them above all other nations. His light and truth would be revealed through them, and they would stand forth under his wise and holy rule as an example of the superiority of his worship over every form of idolatry.
Right.
Chapter 28.
Let's finish reading the last part. You see? Yes, yeah.
Fargone.
Yeah, I like the last part. I think I want to end that before the end. And let's see. It says here, the Lord God shall give unto him the throne of his father David, and he shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom shall be no end. It's Isaiah 9, verse 6, and Luke chapter 1, verse 32 and 33. I don't know why they ended it so soon. But either way, so it's nice to hear how they explain the Ten Commandments, what it means, and to see how God is so intimately entwined with humanity. He's talking to them, he's speaking to them, he's giving laws and giving instruction how to govern themselves, how to order themselves. And he's constantly there with Moses, and he's telling Moses what to do and to give to them, to the people and to his helpers, the other judges. But isn't it amazing how simply when Jesus came in the New Testament, how he talks to the disciples and what he gives to them, then he gives it, and he tells them to give it to the other people. So it's the same. It's God Himself. God the Father seems to be working more with Jesus in the Old Testament, and then in the New Testament you have, this is my opinion now, and in the New Testament is more of Jesus and God the Father again, and the Holy Spirit intertwined. And it's like, it's amazing. And the Holy Spirit is there, is God too. So 3 in 1. And it's like it's a constant back and forth, and humanity is right in the middle of it. God, He wants to be with us at all times. He wants to dwell with us. He loves us that much, and He just wants us to cherish His presence and see how holy and special He is. If things are done in a way that He has it, where it's very orderly and in structure, the world would be so much of a better place in so much detail. People say, oh, he's so legalistic, all the rituals and the stuff, and he's death and anything goes wrong, death and everything goes wrong. He's just saying how disorder and chaos. God doesn't like it. He likes him to be in orderly fashion. He's not just trying to zap him to harm people. He wants to have fun. He wants to help people. He wants us to have a life that is fulfilling, that is at peace and at rest, with no one defrauding, harming, or overreaching themselves. Causing offense, and like law of no usury. Don't charge tax. Like like some people that lend you money or something, and they want to charge you extra. Lend me $5, but I got to pay back 7 or 8. Those little things. Lend you 10, you got to pay back 20. So little things. God's like, you got to be fair. No one should be a slave for so long. If you sold your soul to say because you couldn't pay a debt, you say, okay, like say to become a servant. I owe a credit card or something, I can't pay. Like using today's standards. Can't pay, so listen, I'll work. Remember, we talked the example. Go to a restaurant, can't get food, can't pay, you have to go wash the dishes. Same thing, you couldn't pay your debt, you go work for the person. Now listen, I'll work, my kids will work with you for a couple of years and help to take care of the farm. We'll take care of the animals, I'll work with this. And then you pay off the debt, you work off the debt. So it's the same situation. But sometimes people say, oh no, God's so legalistic and ritual. God's not condoning and promoting slavery, but He permits us to be servants to one another, to help each other, to see, hey, sometimes we can grow into things where we might miss and forget things, and He wants us to be a good part of helping each other. So by His mercies we shall. So thank you for joining us for this one. We shall continue. Next one will be about idolatry at Sinai. That's what else He has in store. God bless you all.